The rope feels wrong in her hands. Too smooth, too modern against the ancient texture of the kapok bark. She wraps it 3 times around the trunk at chest height, testing the friction coefficient with her full body weight. The fibers hiss against wood grain, a high-pitched whisper that fills the microphone. Her first throw aims for the sturdy branch overhead, but the weighted end falls short by 2 meters, crashing through understory ferns with a defeated thump. Second attempt. She adds a river stone to the rope's end, tying it with a clove hitch her fingers execute from muscle memory. The throw arcs beautifully upward, and the knot unravels mid-flight. The stone plummets, missing her left shoulder by inches.
Here we go.
She doesn't curse, and there's no one to hear it.
Got it.
But her jaw clenches so hard the camera catches the muscle twitching beneath sun-damaged skin. A sharp exhale through nostrils. She squats, untying the failed knot with deliberate slowness, and starts over. Third time, a bowline. The throw clears the branch.
Yes!
The sound of rope slapping over wood echoes like a whip crack in the humid air. She pulls, tests. The entire branch groans. A low, woody moan that vibrates through the tree skeleton. Too thin. Wrong choice. She has to start the search again, circling the massive trunk, looking upward until her neck aches, until she finds a fork where 3 thick limbs converge. The climbing begins only after 23 minutes of failure. The ASMR layer here is frustration made audible, ragged breathing, the slap of palms re-gripping rope, boots scraping bark as she ascends 6 inches and slides back 4. When she finally reaches the platform height, straddling the branch with thighs burning, her fingers find bird droppings, old wasp nests cemented to the wood, and a column of bullet ants marching in military precision. She jerks back instinctively. The branch sways, and she wraps both arms around it like a desperate lover, cheek pressed to moss-covered bark, waiting for her heart to slow enough to think. Thirst announces itself not as discomfort, but as a metallic taste coating her tongue. The descent from the tree is faster than the climb. Gravity assists recklessness. Her boots hit ground with a double thud that sends a small gecko skittering into leaf litter. She follows the sound principle. Water runs downhill, but the jungle floor is a labyrinth where downhill shifts every 20 paces. The machete becomes her compass, slashing at vines that spring back with wet thwacks against her forearms. 30 minutes of hiking brings her to a sound, the musical trickle of moving water over stones. The creek is narrow, barely a meter wide, but clear enough to see smooth pebbles at the bottom. Her reflection stares back, face streaked with mud, hair plastered to scalp with sweat, pupils dilated from the canopy's eternal twilight. She doesn't drink. Not yet. The first filter attempt uses her spare shirt, stretched between 2 sticks above her canteen. She pours creek water through the fabric. It emerges cloudy brown particles suspended in liquid. Failure. The shirt isn't tight enough. She tries folding it in layers, 4, then 6,
Still dirty.
but the water flow slows to individual drops, each one making a hollow plink against the metal canteen that could be a meditation bell if she weren't so desperately thirsty. Second method, charcoal from last night's fire, a small blaze she'd built in a termite mound's hollow. She crushes the black fragments between 2 river stones, the grinding producing a gritty crunch that resonates in the jaw. She layers it with sand, gravel, then moss inside a hollowed bamboo section. The water that trickles through is clearer but tastes like smoke and earth. She drinks anyway, 3 long swallows. Her throat clicks audibly with each gulp. The water is body temperature, mineral heavy, alive with microscopic gambles. She refills 4 containers, knowing tomorrow she'll need to boil everything. Her lips are cracked. When she licks them, the camera catches the tiny sound of moisture on drought. The lumber doesn't exist yet. She must create it. The machete rings against a dead ironwood sapling with each strike. Clang, thunk, a 2-note rhythm that will repeat 300 times before the tree falls. Her right shoulder starts burning at strike 42. By strike 100, her grip slips, and the blade bites into her left thumb's base.
I'm not stopping.
Not deep, but enough.
Not yet.
Blood wells up, bright red against the dark stain of the handle. She doesn't stop to bandage it. She spits on the cut, wipes it on her pant leg, and continues. The tree falls at 2:47 p.m., judged by sun angle through canopy. It crashes through ferns with a vegetative roar. Limbing the trunk is surgery. Each branch must be severed flush to create a clean pole. The sound design here is layered. The snap of green wood separating from heartwood, the whisper of leaves dragging across the forest floor as she pulls branches aside, the rasp of her breathing synchronized to machete swings. She harvests 4 poles, each 3 meters long. They must reach the tree. The first carry attempt fails spectacularly. She balances 2 poles on her shoulders, but their weight is asymmetric. 10 steps in, the rear pole slides backward, its end catching on a root. The momentum whips her around, slamming her hip into a palm trunk. She gasps, a sharp inhale that borders on a whimper, and lowers the wood. She sits. 30 seconds of stillness. Her hands shake from exertion. Then she devises the drag system. Rope tied to one end, hauled behind her like a sled. It works, but every meter traveled produces a chorus of friction sounds. Wood scraping over stone, bamboo leaves rustling as the poles push through them. Her boot squelching in mud that releases trapped gases with each step. At the base of the kapok tree, she faces the vertical problem. The pulley system she imagines doesn't exist yet. So she climbs with the rope, loops it over the branch, descends, ties the first pole, and hauls from ground level. Her body weight becomes the counterbalance. The pole rises in jerks. 6 inches up, 3 inches slip back. The rope burns across her palms even through calluses. The ASMR microphone captures the fibers groaning under tension, individual strands popping like miniature gunshots. When the first pole finally rests on the branch platform, she collapses onto her back, chest heaving, staring up at her future home through the lattice of leaves. Darkness in the jungle doesn't arrive. It erupts. One moment the canopy filters green-gold light. The next, it's a solid black ceiling pressing down. She's still on the ground, camped between the kapok's buttress roots that form natural walls around her. The fire is her only religion tonight. But the wood is wrong. Everything here is saturated with moisture that the sun never fully evicts. The kindling smolders instead of igniting, producing white smoke that makes her eyes stream. She blows on the ember bed, cheeks puffed, and the camera catches the wet sound of saliva on her lips, the whistle of air through the gap in her front teeth. Attempt 7 produces flame, a tiny orange tongue that licks at dry inner bark shavings. She feeds it obsessively, twigs the thickness of pencils, then fingers, building architecture from combustion. The fire's voice becomes the soundtrack. The snap of resin pockets exploding, the hiss of moisture escaping wood grain, the low whoomph when she adds a chunk of deadfall that's actually dry inside. Smoke rises, curling around the buttress walls, and for a moment, she's inside a chimney made of living wood. Then the night sounds begin. Not the cliched jungle noises, but specific horrors. The scream of a howler monkey that sounds exactly like a human child in distress. The rustle of something large moving through undergrowth 30 meters away. Methodical, unhurried. The clicking of insects she can't identify, rhythmic and mechanical. And beneath it all, the low-frequency hum of the jungle's respiration. Millions of organisms exhaling CO2 into the darkness. She doesn't sleep. She tends the fire with the focus of a surgeon, adding fuel every 8 minutes by her internal clock. Her back presses against the tree root, knees drawn up, machete across her lap. At 3 a.m., estimated, something tests the perimeter. The camera doesn't show it, but the audio captures everything. The snap of a branch beyond the firelight, followed by breathing that isn't hers.
Something's out there.
Low, wet breathing. Her hand tightens on the machete handle. The leather grip creaks softly. The breathing circles her camp once, twice, then retreats. She doesn't cry, but her shoulders shake for 15 seconds before she forces them still. The fire burns until dawn paints the canopy gray. The joinery problem has no modern solution. She has no nails, no screws, no metal brackets. The platform must be lashed and pegged using only what the jungle provides. The morning begins with peg manufacture. She selects straight branches from ironwood, each the diameter of her thumb, and sharpens them to crude points using the machete against a flat stone. The sound is a steady scrape, 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 meditative in its repetition. Wood dust collects in the sweat at her collarbone. Pre-drilling the holes is where frustration crystallizes. She heats the machete tip in her cook fire until the metal glows dull red, then presses it against the platform pole where two beams must cross. The wood smokes, releasing a bitter smell like burned coffee. But it doesn't penetrate deep enough. The char layer crumbles when she tries to hammer the peg through with a rock. First peg, broken. She exhales through her teeth, a controlled hiss, and starts over. The second attempt uses a different strategy. She bores the pilot hole with a fire-hardened stick, rotating it between her palms in a bow drill motion. The friction produces a sound like sandpaper on glass, and her palms blister within 5 minutes. The skin separates in translucent layers. She switches to using a makeshift drill bit, a sharpened stone lashed to the stick. It works. Slowly. Each hole takes 47 minutes of continuous drilling. By hole number 4, her hands are bleeding from multiple points. She wraps them in strips torn from her shirt, and the fabric immediately soaks through with red. The first mortise and tenon joint takes shape. The peg slides home with a satisfying thunk, and she lashes it with wet vine that will shrink as it dries, tightening the joint.
One more time, I can do
The ASMR here is the creak of tension, the slight groan of wood fibers compressing under pressure. She tests the joint with her full weight, bouncing slightly. It holds. The relief shows not in her face, but in the way her shoulders drop half an inch, the way she allows herself to sit for a full minute before starting the next joint. 8 more to go. Protein deficiency announces itself through cravings that border on hallucination. She dreams of eggs, of fish, of anything that isn't foraged greens and palm hearts. The bee colony hangs from a horizontal branch 15 meters from her platform. A golden brown mass the size of a basketball, pulsing with movement. She's watched it for 2 days, noting the flight patterns, the guard bee rotations. Honey means calories, larvae mean protein, but the bees mean war. Her armor is pathetic, shirt wrapped around her head like a turban, pants tucked into boots, hands covered in layers of broad leaves tied with vine. She builds a smoke pot from green leaves in a hollowed coconut shell, hoping the tradition holds true across cultures. The smoke rises in thick white columns as she climbs, one-handed, the coconut dangling from her belt on a cord. The first sting hits her neck before she's within 3 meters of the hive. The pain is a white-hot needle that makes her vision pulse. She nearly drops the smoke pot, recovers, keeps climbing. At 2 meters, the air becomes solid with bees. The sound is overwhelming, a rage frequency hum that vibrates her ribcage. She thrusts the smoking coconut toward the hive entrance. Some bees retreat, most attack. Stings pepper her hands. The leaf wrappings are useless. One finds the gap between her shirt and pants, drilling into her lower back. She bites down on a scream, converting it to a nasal grunt. Her hand plunges into the hive. The comb breaks with a wet crack, honey and larvae spilling over her fingers. She grabs a fist-sized chunk and shoves it into a cloth bag. Another chunk. The bees are in her hair now, tangled in the fabric turban, stinging her scalp. She descends so fast it's almost falling, bark shredding her forearms as she slides down the trunk. On the ground she runs blindly, crashing through ferns until the bee sound fades. She collapses by the creek. 16 stings. She counts them by touch. 5 on her hands, 4 on her neck, 3 on her scalp, 2 on her back, 1 on her cheek that's already swelling her left eye half shut. She submerges her hands in cold water. The relief is immediate but temporary. Then she opens the cloth bag. The honeycomb glows amber in the filtered sunlight. She breaks off a piece and puts it in her mouth. The sweetness is so intense it makes her molars ache. She chews slowly, extracting every molecule of sugar, swallowing the waxy comb because she needs the calories too badly to waste anything. 15 minutes later, nausea hits from the bee venom, and she vomits behind a tree, but she keeps the rest of the honey. Pain is just the price tag. The floor exists now. 4 poles lashed in parallel, cross-braced with thinner branches woven between them like basket work. It's not beautiful. Gaps between the poles measure up to 6 inches in places,
Please, no.
but it's structural.
Water.
She tests it from below first, hanging from the beams and bouncing, listening for the groan that signals failure. The wood holds. The lashings hold. She climbs up and stands on it for the first time. The perspective shift is profound. At 6 meters elevation, the jungle's character changes. The undergrowth is a dark green sea below. The canopy opens above into fragments of actual sky, blue that she hasn't seen clearly in days. Wind exists here, a slight current that dries the permanent sweat on her skin. She walks the platform perimeter, placing each foot carefully, testing every section. The bamboo cross-weaving flexes slightly under her weight, producing a subtle creak that will become the floor's signature sound. She spreads her sleeping mat, a woven palm frond rectangle that took 9 hours to make 3 days ago. Lying down at height feels wrong initially. Her vestibular system expects the ground 6 meters below, and when she shifts position, there's a micro-vertigo before her brain recalculates. But then exhaustion overrides caution. She closes her eyes. The jungle sounds are different from up here. Bird calls are louder. Primate movement in the canopy branches is close enough to feel the vibration. But ground predators are distant now, their threat level reduced to theoretical. She sleeps for 4 hours straight, her first uninterrupted sleep since arriving. The platform sways gently in the wind, a motion like being rocked. When she wakes, it's to rain. Not the violent downpour she feared, but a steady drizzle that beads on the remaining leaves above her and drips through the platform gaps onto her legs. She's too tired to move. She watches the drops fall through the wooden slats, each one catching light as it plummets to the ground far below. Tomorrow she'll build a roof. Tonight she's earned the right to simply exist 6 meters closer to survival. Palm fronds are deceptively hostile. They appear soft from distance, but up close, each spine along the midrib is a microsaw that catches skin. She harvests 20 large fronds from a stand of fan palms, each cut producing a wet schlock sound as the machete severs the base. Dragging them back to the tree adds new scratches to her forearms, thin red lines that well up slowly. The weaving pattern she attempts is based on childhood memory of a basket-making demonstration, over-under, alternating each row. But palm fronds aren't basket reeds. They're thick, inflexible, and have their own geometric opinions. The first panel she creates looks correct until she tries to lift it. The whole thing separates, fronds sliding apart like a failed card house. She stares at the wreckage for 10 seconds, then gathers the fronds and starts again. Second attempt, she splits each frond lengthwise, creating thinner, more pliable strips. This works better. The weaving sound becomes rhythmic, the whisper of palm fiber sliding over palm fiber, the slight creak as she pulls each crossweave tight, the occasional snap when a strip breaks under tension. Her hands, still healing from the drilling blisters and bee stings, protest every movement. She works through it, fingers moving in mechanical repetition even as fresh blood spots appear on the green palm strips. By midday, she has 3 panels, each large enough to cover a square meter. The attachment system is crude. She lays them across the platform's overhead poles and lashes them down with vine, creating overlapping sections like roof shingles. The first rain test comes unplanned, a tropical shower that materializes from clear sky within minutes. She huddles under the new roof, watching water sheet across the palm weave. 90% of it diverts, but 10% finds the gaps, dripping through in persistent streams that force her to shift position twice. She spends the next 4 hours adding a second layer, doubling the thickness. The improvement is immediate. When the evening rain arrives, she stays dry, completely dry. The sound of rain hammering the palm roof is white noise, a static hiss that drowns out the jungle's night chorus. She lies on her mat, staring up at the woven ceiling 40 centimeters above her face, and allows herself one small luxury. She smiles. The expression feels foreign on her face, muscles unused for days. But it's real. The sunset from the platform is a color spectrum the ground never revealed. Orange light filters horizontally through the canopy layers, igniting every leaf edge in neon gold. She sits with legs dangling off the platform's edge, bare feet swinging in empty air, the machete resting across her lap like a sleeping cat. Her hands are wrapped in clean strips of cloth torn from her spare shirt, white bandages already showing brown stains from tree sap and old blood. The inventory of her body is brutal, 16 bee stings in various stages of healing, the swelling on her face finally receding enough to open her left eye fully, 7 distinct cuts on her hands and forearms, 3 of which will definitely scar, blisters on both palms broken and reformed twice. Her right shoulder has a deep ache that suggests strained rotator cuff. Hip bruise from the pole-carrying incident bloomed purple and yellow, but she's alive, and she has shelter. The house makes its own sounds now. The wooden joints creak in conversation with wind pressure. The palm roof rustles like shuffled paper when branches above sway. The rope lashings sing in different pitches depending on tension. It's a symphony of her own construction. She runs her fingers along the nearest support pole, feeling the tool marks from machete shaping, the smoothness where her hands have already worn the wood from repeated climbing. Below, the jungle floor dissolves into darkness. Above, the first stars appear through canopy gaps, pinpricks of cold light that have witnessed this exact scene a million times. Human versus forest, fragility versus indifference, and the stubborn insistence that will can overcome biology. She doesn't philosophize. She doesn't narrate her triumph. Instead, she reaches for her water canteen, takes a long drink, and swallows with an audible click of throat muscles. Then she lies back on her mat, pulls a corner of her spare cloth over her torso, and interlaces her fingers behind her head. The kapok tree sways slightly in the evening breeze. The platform moves with it, a gentle rocking motion, side to side, like a cradle suspended in the green cathedral. Her breathing slows, deepens, synchronizes with the tree's rhythm. And 6 meters above the predators, the parasites, and the earth that wants to reclaim all human ambition, she closes her eyes and lets the jungle hold her weight for the first time.